right, so we're at the RD Speed Garage, and I'm here with Mike Maier from Mike Maier Inc., and I'm here with Tom Kirkham. We're here today, we have the Voodoo Falcon. So this was a project we started about 2 years ago. I had a crazy idea of taking a 63.5 Falcon Sprint and making it one of the baddest street machines, racers, street cars in the country. And it's no easy task, you know, after a lot of research. I've known Tom for a long time. You know, Tom Kirkham, synonymous with the aluminum Cobra body roadsters. And Mike, you know, not only is an incredible engineer when it comes to suspension, I didn't want to go with anything like off the shelf bolting it. I wanted it to be built for this car, around this car, and all the challenges that came with it. He's also legendary hot shoe, you know, behind the wheel. So he's coming from a driver's perspective. And anyway, we're here today. This is it. So we're finally at the point now where we're ready to kind of, I want to see what they've done for the last 2 years, because it's been a haul. So I'm going to take off and let me see this thing. Looks good.
You gotta pull off the bumper there.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Jorgen?
That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing. Look at the flares. I mean, the flare work, nice work, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
And Jeremy at your shop.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah. Even the subtle. Look at that, Mike. Just the back, the fender work in the back. That whole panel it's not only flared, which, you know, it almost looks factory, but then you look inside, it's got a really cool. It's got to be 2-3 inches out over stock.
I think that's the really important thing. When you called us up and you said, hey, this is a picture of a car I want to build a car like, it's a lot of discussion about that wheel tire packaging, and it's easy to put just a big bubble flare on something.
Yeah.
But to do it right, it always takes a lot of work in a lot of little places. And I think Tom and Jeremy at Cubic really did a great job at finding all the little places, because people call us up all the time for how to fit this systems like this. Yeah. And you're like, well, it's a little bit over here, it's a little bit over there. I mean, you tell the story. Right. It wasn't all in one spot.
No.
Oh no, it's stretched everywhere. And Jorgen and I had lots of fights on how wide the tire could be. Tom, I want it wider. No, there's no room.
Yeah, there's no room, yeah. Well, I wanted to keep the look of, like, when you looked at it, like on its own, when you're sitting looking at the car, you're like, it looks like a Falcon. I didn't want to lose it where it didn't look like a Falcon anymore. You know, that was the one thing. I mean, it's, as Mike was saying, I didn't want it chopped up, butchered, big flares, you know, motor sticking out of the hood. I wanted it to, when someone walked up and then they really started looking at it, or if it was parked next to another Falcon Sprint, you really see the difference. I mean, there's so much detail. Just this flare work up in the front, that rear panel is amazing. That's just the body. I mean, then underneath this thing, it's, you know, that car back there, the GT350 R, was kind of what led to what I wanted to happen underneath. This here is what, you know, I'm a kind of old school guy, as you could tell looking around the garage in here. I love Trans Am era. I think that's like the golden age of hot rods and cars, and I wanted to do a modern-esque version of that Holman Moody Falcon. You know, I saw one at a vintage race many years ago, and it really, back of my mind, this is kind of the take or the spin that I wanted to go, but to handle and really handle like a supercar. That's what it came down to. And luckily, I got these two guys together. I don't even know what they're saying half the time when they're building this thing and the challenges, but I trusted them, and man, this thing's amazing. The way this car pulls is it's just amazing. I mean, when it gets from like 4,000 all the way up to 8,500, it just does not stop. It's fun. just so many details. Like Tom, I mean, I know what it took to make this. This is not fiberglass. This is not just riveted and then put on. You shaped these by scratch,
hand,
right?
Yeah, from steel.
Yeah, even underneath, it's kind of hard to, you can feel it. I mean, like.
Yeah, we welded in a rod right here.
Yeah.
So it's got a nice thick lip on it. We were also trying to maintain the curvature of the body right here so that this line is continuous around here and feeds back into this line. Trying to make it all look like how the factory would have done it.
Yeah.
If they'd had tires this big.
It looks like it. I mean, if they built the Falcon today, you would probably see something like this on it. I mean, it gives it a good.
Absolutely.
It's not too much. You know, at first, I remember when we talked about this, I was like, is it going to look weird having like this kind of flare with a back panel that doesn't have that kind of flare? It's a different kind of flare in the rear. Mm-hmm. But man, it is amazing.
Yeah, another one of our fights, if you remember, you were screaming at me.
Not to break this line.
Not to break this line.
Yeah, yeah. And that's important because, I mean, when you look at a car, I mean, everything's about lines, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, like everything. And it can make or break a car, and sometimes you don't know why it made or break a car. Like, you've ever looked at a car and said, man, they did a lot of work, but something's missing. Like, something's not right. Like, and this is right. Like, that's awesome. And then we got these wheels. I mean, this was a battle nonstop with Mike, with you, with everyone, because we didn't want the looks or the feel of the car to outweigh performance. Again, this is not a trailer queen. We want to race this thing. We're going to try to bring this, good guys, autocross, Optima, road challenges, whatever. So Forge Line made these custom, and I wanted something. We had the challenge because we tried to get so much track, and you had to fit what's under this hood, which we'll talk about in a minute, but what's under this hood here, we had to fit in a really restrictive, from suspension design to the motor being in there.
So topically, you have to have the look, and you got to enjoy what you're seeing, but kind of like a great relationship over years, the looks you'll get climatized to it. Yeah. And if it's a pile of garbage, it doesn't matter how pretty it is, it has to drive. Has to have great character, has to have great personality when you're in the seat for hours on end. And so the compromise between the width of the motor and the width of the car was a very regulated thing. We were not willing to compromise geometry,
right?
Because we knew that would make the car be even prettier, if you will.
Right.
Have even more of a curb appeal. Because once you fall in love with its character, it makes the external actually even better because you're falling in love with the whole car, not just the way it looks sitting there, but it's it's a pile.
Right. So then you get to what you did on the back, which this is.
The front was hard.
The front was hard.
The rear was
really tough. So
borderline impossible.
I think you pushed it out 2 or 3 inches. So doing this, I asked Tom, I didn't want to have big, like our Hoonigan over there, I didn't want to have big flares sticking out the back. It would ruin the line of the car that we talked about. So I wanted it to cut a flare, which is unbelievable here. This was raised, this is like 5 inches, 4 inches about higher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
maintain the original lines.
And then I say we, I'm taking credit, but we went wider on the panels themselves. And that was a challenge, just how to do it. I mean, I don't know how you did it. You disrupted the paint slightly. We did some touch up when we redid it, but it was only localized. We blended it in.
Yeah, we put a big porta power in there and jacked it out
and you built mini tubs.
And we built mini tubs, and the tubs hold the fender out.
Yep. So inside, we kept it pretty minimal. We took the back seat out. There's not much. There's a little bit of dynamat in here just to keep this motor. There's a harmonic thing going on with a flat plane crank. And then the seats, we kind of, there was this car, in the 60s race, we kept it kind of true to air. I tried to get as much bolstering. I didn't want to get that look of, like I see a lot of pro touring cars where it's a 60s car and they got a modern Italian race seat or a drag race seat inside. I try to keep it with the seat vents. Kind of like when this thing raced at Monte Carlo, they raced in Europe. That was the look. You can see the head bolsters on the top. They're kind of round, which was kind of the thing in that era. Running the Haltac system in there. That's been great. Tom's been working with the guys at Haltech getting this dialed in. So with this Voodoo GT350 R motor, we could not use any of the original ECU, wiring harness, and everything else. It's completely built from scratch. With Tom working side by side with Haltech, they've remapped the entire engine to fit this car. That's pretty cool.
I think there's something really important in what you're saying, and I've got people nowadays, and this is over 50 years ago now, right? This is
going on 60.
Yeah,
60 years,
this is, and so that span of time is losing the clientele that actually knows what a real feel is, right? You've got these people driving these cars. Oh man, I've got this classic 1998 whatever. 1998. Now you look at it, you're like, oh geez, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
But they had fuel injection, they had drive-by-wire, then they had all these things, and that visceral brake pedal feel, the way the wheel feels in your hands when it's still got some hydraulic to it. It doesn't cover up with electric. I mean, electric's rad, I like that, but all the feel when you're in a turn and you can feel the tire rolling under a little bit and you can get it on its haunches, all these things have been captured with that new tech. Everybody that says, I want the old style with the new tech, I don't think they actually want all the new tech, or at least a lot of us don't.
I don't.
I want
the reliability of the new tech.
But I still want to feel the car. And I want to know that I did this, not the car.
Right.
You know, I think that's the style and the ability to not lose the craft of driving.
Yeah. Well, so now we're here. You know I love a rear end. So anyhow, usually the trunk is nothing exciting, but I mean, there is some real magic happening in here.
You got some junk in your trunk here.
You got some junk in the trunk. So what's cool here, I'm not going to start with everything's really cool in here. But if you look at the tubs you were talking about earlier and how it's all welded in and it's holding this out, that is super trick, really subtle. And then we have an AccuSump for the motor, which has given us a little bit of insurance, a little extra oil. I think it's about 3 quarts in there. And then we have Mike's creation. This suspension is so cool. Just cool to look at for me. I mean, I love the way it looks. But what it does to this car is it transforms it. I mean, for me. I mean,
well, that's good because you're the user.
That's right.
It's good. It's good.
So explain what that is, because to me it looks cool. I'm like, look at it. It's just awesome looking. I mean, I wish I could have a clear trunk so people could see it when I'm driving. But this wasn't off the shelf. You built it for this car, but you invented this system. So what is that called?
So this rear suspension, it's just not the top. It's everybody looks at the rocker arm set up in the back and they're like, oh look, it's a rocker arm, but it's really we call it the Mod 2 suspension. Mod 2 is like saying, hey, I'm really gonna want to use my car. I want it not only to look great, but I really want to use it. So it has a full floater rear end housing. It has a torque arm. It's got tubular lower links, aluminum links. It's got push rods to these JRI rear shocks. JRIs. Jeff Ryan makes the top level shocks in the industry right now for Trans Am and NASCAR and any kind of really high-end racing you want to talk about. JRIs on it. So I learned years ago, shocks are like the blood of the suspension, so it's all the best stuff you can have. So later on, you don't call me up and say, why am I getting hub seal leaks? Or why does my car feel like crap over these bumps? Well, I got you a crappy shock. It's a coilover though.
What's the warranty?
Yeah, right? There's so much latitude from here on out, from whatever you want the car to do. Like we were talking in test drives, if he decides I want to drive it across the country, well, we can put some quick pins in there and swap coils out real quick. It's like that easy for a good long drive. So this is intended to be used really hard, but also have the latitude for whatever you might want to decide to do in the future.
Wow. So like here you could really see like there's nothing that resembles anything that came from the factory, really, when we're under here, right? I mean, this is like, it's just incredible amount of, you know, the work in this thing is insane. Well, so like what did you do here? I mean, this rear end alone. I mean, look at the work in that.
There's the thing that really flows throughout at least our family business, which I really appreciate the fact that you guys appreciate it, is it's all about function and then being able to have the latitude to grow with it, and then hopefully not starting off wishing that you had something extra or more than. It's like, no, you got it, and we have places definitely to grow to within what we have.
Yeah, we have really appreciated getting it, and that it wasn't a pile of crap. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've bought
Off
parts
the shelf, like a
that are
bolt-on kit or weld-on kit.
Bolt-on kit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there are attributes of this that we didn't nail, and I think that's really, really important to not BS.
Yeah.
Because so many, I can't tell you, growing up as a kid, you'd see things in the magazine and then you'd find out later on that car had 3 wheels on it. It didn't even have a 4th. They just had the beauty shot from an angle, right? And so it was always a facade in the magazines and stuff, I felt like, as a kid. So, we had growth issues. You know, we had things like
yes, but we had something to work with too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
We're on the right track. There was definitely, like you said, it's not going to work. We have to make another one of those, or another one of these, or another one of.
We went together pretty darn with minimal headache. I mean, like with
I
respect
wouldn't go quite that far.
but back to it. I mean, it was the first true Falcon Mod 2 that, other than Craig's car, that we built and shipped out. So it's the first one, right?
Oh yeah, and as far as that goes, it was really, really good, amazingly good.
Yeah, that was a goal. I mean, we were proud of our welding. We're proud of, like, just realistic things like, hey, when we sell you a sway bar, it sounds funny, the rear sway bar is small. It's only like a 50-pound bar, because you don't want to lighten the inside tire too much. And then the other little attributes are there's slots. They're not holes, because when you're laying underneath this thing in like 100-degree weather and you're sweating
on 150-degree asphalt.
Yeah, you don't want to be trying to unbolt things and rebolt it. So the sway bar link has a slot, so you just loosen it, slide it, tighten it, and it's hopefully a lot easier. The pannered rod kit versus having individual holes, obviously you have to get enough torque to deal with this, but you can loosen it and slide it and adjust it and get it dialed in and nailed. So the pannered rod sets a lot of the side bite. The torque arm, going to choose, and why we did a torque arm versus other styles, is you don't have to cut big holes in your floor for 3 links. 4 links, unless you're running a bird cage type rear end setup, they bind.
Yeah. So why do you want a torque arm? Like,
the torque arm gives you a ton of forward bite. It's like an old school ladder bar. It's what lifts the car by this point. Camaros had it. Lots of it, like old truck arm suspensions are like that.
What year?
Yeah, all through the 80s and all through the early 2000s. I mean, Ford had to SCCA had to rewrite the rule book in solo and autocross, because the Camaro's torque arms were so dominant over the Fords. Nobody wanted to race a Ford. And this is based on that setup. So we ran a lot of torque arms and a lot of stuff. Old Blue's got a torque arm. Just beat the tar out of it. So it's a way to bolt a really, really high-performing suspension under a car without massively cutting up the car. And then you can see these little guys, these brackets that go up underneath the frame rails, that's actually kind of like the heart and soul of the whole thing. It's what hangs the rocker cradle assembly.
Yeah.
It's where the pannered rod mounts. And so basically your rear suspension hangs from that point and basically locates it, and then you run into your lower control arm mounts, which are your old leaf spring mounts. I mean, so
something from original from the factory.
Yeah, and we tried, because I've been working on cars myself for so many years that the last thing I want is a pain in the ass. I mean, so you're asking to do all this stuff, so you already have a big to-do list.
Yeah.
So let's try somehow to not make the list bigger. Oh, the other thing is, this has now actually kind of become our Euro brake kit. I don't know if I didn't even tell you guys that. In Europe, they have to have a mechanical lock. They can't for parking brakes. It's part of their DOT standards. And so you were one of the first guys. One other guy had this. We hand cut these Willwood hats to fit this speedway
these
housing.
These are 4-piston Willwoods.
Yeah, they're 4-piston, big 4-piston 13s with electric parking brakes.
Right.
So that's,
which is kind of nice in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and they clamp like heck, but
and then big axles in this thing.
Oh yeah, full floating housing axles. I mean, so you can slide the axle right out the cap and service it, whatever, you know, because as you beat on it, you do want to actually cycle out axles. So
yeah.
And then you got your 6-speed, and you can see your floor splice that Tom and Jeremy did, where they sliced in that 2017 Mustang in here. I mean, what a job.
And this is the 6-speed. I mean,
it's
all stock.
Yeah, also bone
All stock, though we did add a trans cooler.
It came with
It came with a trans cooler, but we use the set trab coolers though, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one has a mechanical pump in it from the factory.
Yeah, and then getting to the motor, but we changed out. We did a remote oil filter setup on this thing, along with a billet, Ford Performance, high volume oil pump, right?
Oil pump, right, huh?
So this suspension, for me, started back when I was like, I don't know, 25. When I was 19.
So a couple years ago?
Yeah, there was some development in this. I started doing suspensions on the front of these, on the front of cars when I was a teenager, and then I built my first race car. It was a strut car. Then I turned it into a double A-frame car. And this is a lot of the stuff I did back then. And then Craig came along and manufactured readied it. Like, where he came and said, okay, Maier, this is your ideas. We're gonna make all the brackets interface and interlock. And so there's little tabs and keys everywhere where everything locks together. So it's all concentric left to right, it's all uniform, but there's a lot of work in these arms. Things that we ran into issues with is this new generation, is it a Gen 2 Coyote pan?
Yeah.
This pan's
Or Voodoo motor,
yeah, Voodoo, I'm sorry. This pan's ginormous. It's probably, we talked about it last time I was here. It's probably one of the most.
Yeah, it's incredibly well engineered. We had an aftermarket pan that we're going to put on it.
We both
pulled
looked
this
at
one,
it.
and we said, no way. And we put it back on. Ford did their homework on that oil pan.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that pan. And so the cross member and having this cross member fit along with the motor mounts and the height of the motor mount and what room we have to the bottom of the hood, that was all really, really important. I mean, just interfacing that along with, on top of that, having these little subtle updates where all the suspension points are on keys.
Yeah.
So we can adjust all the geometry. So let's just say a year down the road, you're racing a car. Because quite frankly, we haven't put miles and miles and miles on this. So we want to make sure that when you start getting the character of the car and you start figuring it out, and you say, Mike, I really want the car to do this because it's your car.
Yeah.
We have as much opportunity to tune and adjust what you want for geometry. That's why we went with the JRI shocks. That's why we went with the keyed inner pivot point mounts. That's why we have the Howell ball joints where you can change the lengths of the ball joints for different geometry. There's so much tunability in the front of this car that hopefully you'll never get into a boxed corner and be like, well, now what do I do with it?
Right.
So.
And then bigger brakes, like 6 pistons, I'm guessing, right? The Willwoods?
Yeah, so this is a Willwood 6-piston Aerolite caliper, 14-inch rotors.
Good stopping power. Yeah.
They're kind of, again, I really like Willwood because they have a lot of latitude. We have a huge span of brake pads we can try. They have multiple different rotor combinations from floating to non-floating to different vane configurations. You'll see a trend in the way I'm talking basically is everything. I've done enough stuff now to realize that just because you think you want this right now doesn't mean it's what you want in a year.
Right, right.
So design in growth.
It's so good.
But you did a good job, Tom.
Tom, this is a lot of, both you guys, from engineering and just the making everything fit. With you two being able to talk to each other about, me, I could just imagine if I didn't have Tom and I'm gonna have some guy and he's trying to explain to you, well, this doesn't fit and that doesn't fit, and like we would never be here without this little dynamic duo.
So
Dynamic gurus.
I'm like, I was like, does that mean I'm Robin? It's like, dang, there's so much work.
Yeah, and again, we didn't make it a trailer queen. This doesn't look like, you've seen the cars roll over the block where they have mirrors on the bottom. That's not what this car is about. It's all clean. It's all functional.
Sanitary.
Sanitary. It's surgical. Wait, that's actually a better one.
Yeah.
This is made to do one thing. We just didn't dress it up with a bunch of chrome and bling and polish some things and, try to make it look good. It just looked good on its own.
Yeah.
Out of pure function.
It's kind of the best, right? When something's developed well and designed well, it just kind of takes on its own.
Right. Yeah, let's get this thing down off the lift, open the hood, and check out the engine, what we've been talking about, and why it's going to be known as the neighbor hater. All right, so right here is a huge inspiration to what I wanted to do with this right here. This is a Mustang Shelby GT350 R. I personally think it's one of the greatest Mustangs ever made. Undoubtedly, it's one of the greatest American V8 motors ever built. Naturally aspirated, flat plane crank, about 590 horsepower before you start tuning it and taking the emissions off. An incredible machine. It goes, it revs up to about 8,300 RPM, and this sound is like none other. I think it's one of the best sounding engines in the world, and Ford will never make this car again. Which leads me to what we wanted to do. We found a totaled Mustang Shelby GT350 R. We bought it. It only had a couple thousand miles on it. And we took the driveline out of it, meaning the motor and the transmission. We scrapped the rest, got rid of it. And you can see the width of this car. I think this thing is 6 inches or so, 7 inches wider than what this Falcon is, amongst other things. And when you look inside, you'll see what we're dealing with. I mean, it's a massive motor in here. And we wanted to take this and not only fit it in here, but fit it in here where we didn't have a problem with a giant motor hanging off the front or losing suspension and losing everything else. And this is really where Tom and Mike came in. Like, how do we make this happen? So when you look at this one, and here we have it. So it looks like it just fits in, right? But Mike and Tom could probably tell you, especially Tom, because he's really shoehorned this in. It's amazing. I mean, normally in the original stock, I mean, Mike can talk about this, there's big shock tower mounts, or what do they call them, right?
Shock towers.
There's shock towers, yeah.
Shock tower mounts. The little what is the motor? 260 V8
260
look tiny. There's nothing stock in here. This is a massive undertaking to make this fit. And fit within the geometry of the suspension design. So you guys can, I mean, it was a challenge, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We had to move the clutch pedal and the brake pedal, master cylinders over to clear the engine. They had to go outboard and up, so that was a major problem. The stock Falcon has a mechanical linkage for the clutch, and we went to hydraulic, so that was another issue. And like Mike was saying, it's putting 3 pounds of crap in a 2-pound bag. So
there was a lot of work to be able to get it to you guys.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think we had drawings almost for a year. We worked on drawings. I mean, late nights, Craig would send me photos first thing in the morning. At 5 in the morning, I'd get revisions of SolidWorks drawings. It was a year's worth. We redesigned the whole back for this car, but that was nothing compared to what went on in the front. I mean, new shock towers, because even our first design didn't fit with the aprons.
Right.
And then there were wrinkles or pressed angles in these aprons that we didn't have knowledge of. So
Yeah, we sent you a lot of photos.
yeah, I mean, it was the amount of work you did to get that front end together, coupled with the generic, information on geometry, coupled with having the motor in SolidWorks, having everything interfaced, oil pan interfaces, how high can the motor be? I mean, the car is tiny. There's no way about it. The car is too small technically for the motor.
Right, and it was a major hassle. I mean, it was a lot of work.
A lot of work, yeah. And then we had the other challenge of these motors are notoriously vibrate like your teeth are coming out. So between you and Mike, we came up with different
bushing combinations
for the motor mounts, all the way through to the transmission route, correct?
Transmission mount, we kept the same. It's stock. Remember, we have the stock floor, so we kept the stock mount.
Right, there you go, right, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not running cats, but we are running Borla mufflers.
Borla mufflers, yep.
Yep. And the sound is
Loud.
loud and amazing.
It's like a whole different driving experience. It's like the sound of it is a trip. I mean, like the visceral experience is completely different.
I mean, just the sound of it, though, is unlike anything I've ever heard out of a car like this.
Yeah.
You know something menacing is coming down the road or on the track.
No, he gets up into that note,
Yeah.
and you.
And this here, a little just extra support. That's,
Yep, the
Yep.
towers, the front of these cars. I mean, these cars. One of the reasons why we kept the shock towers, because we still have shock towers in the car.
Right.
They're just really low profile. Is the strength of this car is not from just the frame rails. So many companies build suspension just off the lower frame rails, and it's a complete lost opportunity not to use all this shear paneling and the load. And so we still actually connect up high to the aprons that we built, and we still need to support all that. So in order to get that drivability and that feel, you can't can that and just say, oh, I got it all bolted to the lower frame rails. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a challenge.
And
for
keep
sure.
saying that you want to stay falling in love with it.
Right.
You know, versus, geez, what did I do?
Right.
It's
Right.
like,
For me, what I like, I love the feeling of driving something like this or like this. I mean, this is an amazing car. The Ford GT is, to this day, I've had this since brand new. I get out of the car and I still have that a little bit of a shake. My adrenaline is just fired
Yeah.
up, and that's that's why I love these cars. So I mean, this is amazing. I mean, I can't wait to have this out, and people are wondering what it is, and when I open it up, most will realize what it is. Again, I'm glad. Fortunately, we got one of these motors, and we were able to make this work. This was not the easy route. I could have bought a crate motor from Ford, typical Coyote motor that a lot of people are doing, or I could have gone smaller displacement and throw a supercharger on it, or do turbos or whatever. But this is naturally aspirated. We're going to be well north of 600 horsepower when this finally dialed in. This thing is going to be a real machine. I am so stoked on this thing. I can't wait to drive it. I mean, this thing's definitely going to have some fun this summer, and beyond. Really, I can't wait.
yeah, it's going to hopefully get a lot of smiles out of it.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll be bringing this thing everywhere.
When you walk in a tongue, I can see a child melting under the shades, and you follow but look like a mad cat. Throw your jokes like a shouting blade. Oh, are you trying to kill me, babe? Oh, with your lips so tight. Oh, are you trying to steal my breath? Oh, with your damn like fire. And I can bury the look at your sticky hair, without having to cry, my babe. I could spill this worrying at street first, just to have you for once by my side.